This is why we are here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, it is.
This is why we're here. That was a moment from our live album reaction to 21 Savage's new studio album, American Dream. If you guys want to check out the full live album reaction that we did with our community yesterday, by the way, it was a legendary night. You guys can check it out in the pinned comment or even in the link in the description. But Lou, let's get into this, all right? Because when American Dream was kind of teased, it started to surface on social media, a lot of people thought, hey, is this going to be maybe a new soundtrack for a movie that 21 Savage is kind of taking care of? But lo and behold, he got on his social media and said that this would be his official third studio album. So with that being said, we have to treat it as a studio album and go into it with full ear. So let's start off with the artist performance. What did you think about 21 Savage on the album?
I mean, even going into this album before I actually got to listen to it, I was a bit worried just because as of late, I feel like he was getting repetitive with the flows in terms of using that Project Pat flow, in terms of having that simplistic, rigid flow that he had on Creepin'. So I was worried that the performance might have been one-dimensional and monotone as we've sort of known 21 Savage to be over the years. But I was pleasantly surprised, bro. And that's like the beauty. Well. That's the beauty of going into an album with maybe lower expectations, that you sort of open yourself up to more surprises. And there's obviously high and low moments within his artist performance. One of the highs being on something like Red Rum, where he has a cold-blooded, energetic performance, where he echoes his rhymes, which reinforces what he's saying. Like, for example, Graveyard, that's where the ops stay. That adds conviction to the tone, to the delivery, and the overall feeling of the song. His ad-lib game was stronger than ever. You get your classic 21-21-21s. You get your On Gods, your Pussies, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
and
the whole package.
You get the ad-lib, which is new, which was on the song, which was called Sneaky. And that sort of was the glue of the song. It kind of it broke up the monotonous flow and gave you a nice break between the flow.
Yeah, because you and I were speaking about that new flow and that new, I guess, sort of ad-lib, you could call it, that he introduced on the album yesterday for Sneaky. And during the live album reaction, we had said that if you did not have that ad-lib that was kind of gluing together all the sections of the verses and that kind of like made up the entire song, then maybe that 21 Savage flow gets a bit sleepy. So I find that was a really cool calculation. Another thing that I really liked about 21 Savage's performance throughout the album is that you didn't necessarily get too much of a certain thing, if that makes sense to you. Because one thing that I was scared about going into this album was like, are you going to get a bunch of Creepin' verses where he's just trying to go mainstream with it and it's trying to be a bunch of like blockbuster hits? And you didn't get that necessarily, because even when you start off the album, you are getting high voltage, menacing 21 Savage energy that everyone in the community loves. On example, songs like All of Me, Red Rum, you get into Sneaky. Then after that, you start getting into songs like née-nah with, let's say Travis Scott, which we're going to talk about in the features. There's just all of these sort of menacing cadences that, if you're an OG fan of like the Savage Mode series or even I Am Greater Than I Was, just these classic 21 Savage performances, they're there for you. Not only that, but one complaint that I have maybe with the artist performance, and it's just because of the type of, I guess, 21 Savage style that I enjoy and that I grew up listening to, was more of the melodic stuff. For example, let's say you go on to a song like Should've Wore a Bonnet, for example, or Prove It, or See the Real, for example. When you start getting a bit more of the softer 21 Savage performances on the latter half of the track list, not that he didn't do a good job on them, it's just that maybe the performances get a bit sleepy for the listener.
They're boring performances,
and you're
bro.
not necessarily as engaged as you could be.
They're absolutely boring performances, and I think that that's the main sort of sentiment that a lot of 21 Savage fans have, is that when it comes to R&B love ballads, that's not 21 Savage's best sort of pocket, and I feel like you do get a lot of those towards the latter end of the track list. Even a song, for example, like See the Real, where he's singing, I do like the fact that he dialed down the auto-tune, but even at that, like, he's not a good singer. I hate to say it. Maybe he can improve over time, but the melodies are not catchy enough. He ends up sounding a bit nasally, and it's just, to me, that wasn't a good performance.
No, but that's not what you're going to 21 Savage for.
Like, but he's giving you that, so I still have to look at it. I can't
I'm not saying not to look over it. I'm saying to look at it, but also, like, it is what it is for the album. Not to say that See the Real was a bad performance all across the board. I feel like it's a bit more of like a Spin 'Bout You sort of performance that you might have found off of Her Loss. That's maybe a way that I could compare it. Something else that I really liked was Red Sky. His verses on that song were really put together. His breath control was on point. The way that he kind of meshed in all of his lines together and was able to stay consistent with his flow, and the flow switches as well on that song was extremely impressive. So overall, I think that, yeah, you might find maybe a bit more sleepier performances, like, let's say, I Seal the Real or Prove It, Should've Wore a Bonnet, but for the most part, throughout the entire track list, he's engaged. It's classic 21 Savage. He has top-tier performances throughout the entire album. I really liked what he did on this.
Yeah, I think that he put his best foot forward in giving us what he's capable of giving us to the best capability, in the sense of like giving you those dark, murderous trap bangers. And I feel like you're getting his best performances on songs like Dangerous or Née-nah, where he sounds hungry and passionate, almost like the anger he has for his ops are sort of fueling him and giving him life on the mic. So I feel like those are the best performances. So overall, I was between a good or a great rating. I want to give it a great rating because it was a pretty consistent performance for the most part.
All the way throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So great rating for the artist performance. But let's get into the content, all right? Because not a concern, but I feel like something that I was thinking about before getting into the studio album is like, is the content going to follow suit with maybe the movie that's going to be releasing this summer? And that's not necessarily something that I really wanted as a 21 Savage fan for this album, just because, you know, as soon as an artist has to lock into a movie score, the direction of the content automatically changes for the album. But with that being said, that was not the case for the studio album, and I'm very happy with that. And I'll explain to you why. Because once you start getting into the album, obviously you get your romantic content matter on songs like See the Real, Prove It, Should Have Wore a Bonnet, the songs that we spoke about in the artist performance. But you're also getting kind of a mix and match of different types of content matter when it comes to different types of tracks. Example, Letter to My Brother, super personal, introspective, incredibly written song from 21 Savage for his standards. Then you get into something like, example, Dark Days, where he's talking about, you know, stay in school and don't get into street life. So there's this sort of like motif going on with 21 Savage. So going back through the album, let's say for your re-listens, what did you find throughout the album that you really enjoyed and things that you feel like could maybe be better for the next effort?
Well, first of all, I think this is the closest we might ever get to a conceptual 21 Savage album. And I do like the fact that there is sort of a theme at play. It's sort of about him wanting to fulfill his American dream because, like I'm sure most of you guys know watching, what led up to this was sort of him facing deportation, the ICE arrest that he was charged with, and then him getting permanent residency, in the United States this year. And it's sort of like a sum up of all of that and how happy he is to have his freedom and to be able to live out his dream. And I think that getting those narrative elements from his mom, who's on the intro and outro, that tied things together very nicely. Apart from that, like you were mentioning, you are getting a nice amount of introspective tracks, like on Dark Days, the outro song, where he's literally rapping about almost repenting for his past behavior and lifestyle choices and trying to steer a newer generation into a different direction, which is a big character arc for 21 Savage. If you listen to Savage Mode and you go into this right after, it's like, whoa, like he really transformed his point of view and his worldviews as a whole. But I will say this, as always, you get your whack bars, and I have to point some of these out like we do for every album, because there was some really bad ones. For example, I pop at his ass like he a pimple, or the worst one of all, it smelled like gas, I think somebody pooped.
Yeah, so you're going to get those types of bars from 21 Savage, and I think that was expected just because, like, he's not a Kendrick Lamar, he's not a J. Cole. Like, it's not necessarily going to be like that. And, you know, you're going to get your fair share of those types of bars. Not only that, but you do get, like, your crazy murder bars, for example, on something like Red Rum, where he talks about spinning the block, catching his opposition. So you do get your standard 21 Savage features throughout this. But another song that I really like as far as introspectiveness is Letter to My Brother. This is fantastic because you have two full verses that kind of talk about 21 Savage going through emotions of betrayal, or him kind of going through his emotions and relationship with God. So, example, the way that he starts off the second verse, this is 21 Savage rapping this, all right? So, Father God, forgive me for my sins. Take the mask off all my enemies that's out here acting like my friends. Did some shit I'm praying I'm never going to do again. I put blood, sweat, and tears inside this win. Crazy stuff, you know? And that's the type of stuff that I like to hear from 21 Savage. Where is he at in his life? You know, what has he done in his career? What has he seen? You know, how has he progressed from maybe I am greater than I was, and where does the evolution go next? So I do feel like that was a good moment on the album for me as far as writing goes.
Another one is All of Me, where he's rapping about just his PTSD, flashbacks of friends that have been lost over the years, and him sort of, you know, wanting to be on the righteous path and to be treading that path. That was really refreshing to hear as well. What I found really funny was that only 21 Savage could make a song about a sneaky link on the song Sneaky sound so scary and aggressive. Like the tone is so interesting because, like, based on what the song is focused on, it's pretty funny that it's such a dark tone for that. So
but the duality within that, I find that absolutely hilarious. But it's a great song.
It's a good song.
Yeah, I think it's going to do well because the thing is that I feel like it may be a big song for the album, especially if the TikTok trends start to get on that whole, like, ad lib that he incorporated within the song itself. But overall, I think the content was good. I mean, you're not going to get anything too crazy, but for 21 Savage's standards, I do feel like this was a good display of content. It kept me interested from song to song. There's certain songs on here, like you said, with the poop bars and, the pimple bars, where I'm just like, nah, this is not that great. And even some of the romantic ballads that I felt like was a bit boring as far as content matter goes. But overall, I do feel like I want to give it a good rating.
That's what I wanted to say, is that, like, I have no problem with a good executed R&B track from a rapper, but with 21 Savage, not only is he almost lifeless on those productions, but even the subject matter, he's rapping about, like, calling Ubers for his girlfriends, and just, like, very uninteresting topics, and no real focus track by track or stories being told or anything that can really grab you and get you immersed. So I agree with you with the good rating though overall. Was there a massive evolution from I Am Greater Than I Was? Not a massive one.
But there was a bit of a step
There was a
up.
bit of an evolution. I mean, I think some of these topics like the PTSD, he's covered it before, but he did give different perspectives on certain topics, so that was appreciated.
Absolutely. So where do you want to go next? You want to go to
One of the
features?
features.
Yeah, so
feature
go
list
for it.
included
Yeah.
Travis Scott, Young Thug, Doja Cat, Summer Walker, Brent Faiyaz, Lil Durk, Mariah the Scientist, and Burna Boy. Pretty stacked feature list. Surprisingly, no Drake feature, which I think a lot of people expected to see. But I do like the balance of the features on the track list, in the sense that you have a good 50% of the track list having features, and the other 50 solo 21 Savage songs.
Not only that, but you do get a good mix between the types of features that you're going to get on this album. So you do have like frequent collaborators, for example, like a Travis Scott and a Young Thug, but there's also maybe some new faces on the album, like a Mariah the Scientist, for example, and a Brent Faiyaz. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Travis Scott on née-nah? Am I pronouncing it right, by the way?
I think it's née-nah.
née-nah.
née-nah. Yeah, we could talk about Travis. I mean, I love the fact that he had an extended minute-and-a-half long performance.
He also starts off the song as well.
Yeah, and it's him rapping over like an instrumental, unlike I've ever heard him rap over before. And I also felt like he was flowing like he was on like his mixtape bag.
Yes.
An older Travis Scott.
Very quick pace, some stuff that you might find off of DBR. Could we agree that this is tied for the best feature off of this album?
Yeah.
I think we could say that.
It's one and two.
It's 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And I think the second one that we need to talk about is Lil Durk on Dangerous. This feature is absolutely crazy. Just how much aggression and the quick flows he comes with. And there's a point of the verse, like you're 75% into the verse and you think he's going to stop.
I think it's done.
There's a bit of a pause and then boom, he comes back in, and then 21 Savage picks up right where from he started. So let me ask you something, all right? Because Durk obviously had a phenomenal performance, but how did you like 21 Savage's chemistry with everyone on the album, and how do you think the overall cast of features added to the album?
I do want to talk about Durk before going into like overall thoughts on it. But yeah, with Durk, I mean, the verse was powerful, it was poignant, it was personal. I love that he felt so free on the song, in the sense of he was unhinged, bro. Like, he was choosing when to speed up the flow, when to slow it down, and it was perfectly executed. And I never would have expected Durk to have the best fucking feature on a 21 Savage album.
Okay, so you give it to him the best feature.
I would probably give him the best feature over Travis Scott, but it's neck and neck. It's neck and neck. But yeah, I do love the performance. But speaking about the chemistry, this is where I'm gonna say that he had great chemistry with pretty much every feature in terms of Doja Cat, Thug, Durk, Travis. To me, where the chemistry did not lie at all was with Burna Boy. At that point, I'm like, okay, you're getting 21 performance on like an Afro beats type song, and this sounds like two verses that belong on two separate songs. So that one was a big red flag for me in terms of them not meshing well.
Another feature that not necessarily I wasn't impressed with, but again, it was a bit of a mix and match that I wasn't too crazy about, was Brent Faiyaz on Should Have Wore a Bonnet. And automatically in the live album reaction, I looked at you and I'm like, is Brent Faiyaz putting his hums at the end of 21 Savage's lines at the beginning of the song? And you go back and you're like, it's a bit awkward, you know, and you're not necessarily like, oh, well, this is horrible, but it's a bit off-putting for the feature. But all in all, it's an all right song. And I mean, the collaboration itself, like, I didn't necessarily expect anything too much out of it, but for the most part, like, I just didn't necessarily enjoy that all too much. Summer Walker has nice vocals on Prove It. It's not necessarily the craziest chemistry, because you're getting like a bit of a rougher demeanor from 21 Savage, and then boom, because these angelic vocals by Summer Walker. But for the most part,
the tempo is too fast for her, in my opinion. That's my one thing that I didn't enjoy. But with Mariah the Scientist, he had great chemistry. She provided great harmonies, and she fit in really well for the outro on that chorus. So that was really good. Let's talk about Thugger, though, because that was an anticipated feature. You got Thugger, 21, Metro. You get a very dynamic Thugger performance. And tell me if you agree, the last section where Thug comes in with the more high-pitched sung inflections, that's the best part.
That is the best part of the entire song itself. Reminds me a bit of like, Well, yeah, it's a Metro Boomin collaboration. So it might like it sounds like a Young Thug that you hear on like a Metro album, for example, or even some older 2016 stuff that he might have done. But what's interesting is that Young Thug and 21 actually share the post chorus as well at the end of that song as well. So I do feel like you said, the better performances come from Young Thug at the end of that song rather than at the beginning. But for the most part, even the way that he comes through at the beginning is pretty cool. So I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but I am going to speak about that song at length when we get into the production because I do have some nitpicks.
But let's talk about the Doja Cat feature because this was a big surprise.
The biggest pleasant surprise, actually, of the album as well. So I'm going to tell you how I feel about it, all right? I felt like this was going to be a big pop attempt. It's quite the opposite.
Yep.
It is absolutely
Legit.
the opposite. And one thing that we were speaking about yesterday, too, off of First Listen was, well, when you listen to Doja Cat, she is such a big part of that song, but it's so, like, well implemented inside that you don't even notice until you start getting into, like, the final half of the song because her vocals almost become like the sample flip of the song itself for the production. And then she has a verse, but it's not necessarily anything too long, so she doesn't overdo her stay. But when you look at what she had to contribute for the song, it was perfect. Like she was literally a part of the entire song, but it was almost like she did an in and out, where she provided those background vocals, did her verse, then gets out right away. So how did you like her chemistry with 21?
It was phenomenal. I feel like what was really cool is that her vocals were also understated, which really matched 21's vibe on that song as well. So, like you said, big pleasant surprise. Tommy Newport, shout out to him because he has an uncredited chorus on Red Sky, and he sounded great. So, much love to him. But yeah, overall with the features, I gave it a great rating. There's a lot of standout performances, and yes, maybe the chemistry doesn't always pair up too well. For the most part, they complemented 21 super well for the entirety.
And they were well calculated as well. By the way, I'm going to agree with the great rating because even when you start to get into the amount of features that make the album, it wasn't oversaturated. You saw some new faces make the album, some freaking collaborators that 21 Savage fans wanted to see. So overall, great rating. But let's get into the production, all right? Because people were asking, well, is it going to be all Metro Boomin? And it wasn't all Metro Boomin. I believe he has 4 credits off of this album. And is that where you want to start with it? Or do you want to talk about the soundscape overall?
Yeah, we can start with the Metro Boomin song, starting off with Pop Your Shit, which to me is overproduced and it makes it almost impossible for 21 or Thug to really find a proper pocket. And I think that just there's too much going on. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the bells and the drums. Kind of reminds me of like the Undertaker theme song, but there's too many conflicting elements within that beat, including like the Thugger ad-libs at the beginning, which again, when it's bled into the production, it just sounds too chaotic and that you can't even get a good gauge of what the sound is.
What's crazy is that even Alan Ritter has a co-production off of this as well. He's on the song as well. So you'd maybe like expect like something
incredible.
Incredible. But it was maybe a production that I wasn't too fancy with, if I should say that. But let's go on to another Metro Boomin placement, and that's gonna be Dangerous. He did this with Boogs the Beast, and it was one of the best productions off the entire album. And what I really liked about it is like those little bell sounds that come in and out of it. Like it just adds a unique factor to it. And automatically, I knew that when they were gonna be attacking such a dark and menacing production like that, mixing with the sample that was provided, it was game, set, match throughout the entire production, and it was super dynamic as well. Because it's not a short song off of the album, so you're not getting them like a stagnant Metro Boomin beat. No, like this is the type of Metro production that I absolutely love, and I was so happy to see this make the album.
My favorite beat on this album has to go to London on the Track, who deserves his praise for that international sample flip on Red Rum, which is mind-blowing because you start off with like these lush violin ensemble, and then you get this hardcore trap beat, and you have these creepy Portuguese vocals that are looped, and it's just so fucking exhilarating. So big shout out to London on the Track.
I thought it was a Metro beat.
I know. I never heard a London beat like that. So I was like, wow, like he really impressed here.
Another production that I'm a big fan of is All of Me. Bro.
Yes.
Like that
Spiff Sinatra.
Oh my goodness. That was absolutely crazy. The Rolls Royce like sample flipping back was absolutely incredible. And like there was this triumphant feeling. Like it was weird because the sample flip is dark and it was also provided by Spiff Sinatra, Knock, Jared Brown, Maxon, and Isaiah Brown. That was the entire cast of producers for this song, and it just sets the tone for the album. Automatically you are engaged. When you get All of Me and Red Rum, you are automatically locked in, and I feel like that's a big part of the album that I feel like really did well for me was the production. I'm such a big fan of the production off of this album, and it perfectly suited what 21 was trying to do throughout the entirety of it.
Also, the beat drop by Honorable C Note on Red Sky is fucking nasty.
That is cool. That is a really cool
one. It's one of the best beats as well. In terms of the R&B cut, cuts. It's kind of standard. You're getting a lot of like looped R&B vocals from old songs with like low-key trap drums. I did really enjoy the Faith Evans sample though on Prove It. That was flipped really nicely.
That was flipped really nicely.
But yeah, overall, I just feel like, yeah, you get like a dark nocturnal soundscape. Sometimes you have the soulful backdrops coming from the samples, which was really cool. Metro did his thing for the most part. I like the fact that 21 Savage went to different producers to give us
a unique experience.
A unique experience, something that's different from the Savage modes. So overall, I was really impressed with the production, and it might be the best aspect of the album.
I'm gonna give it a great rating. Though.
Great rating.
Great rating. Oh, let's keep going on with this. Let's go into the replay values. So I haven't gotten a solo 21 Savage studio album, and this is not including the Savage modes, by the way, since 2018 with I Am Greater Than I Was. So this is a big anticipated album for me, and honestly, I only found out that it was gonna be a solo studio album from 21 like a couple of days ago. So for me, like I had an expectation, but I was also like, as you said, they weren't too high because of the recent features, and I haven't been a big fan of them. But going into this album, it was such a pleasant surprise because I think there's going to be a lot of songs I'm going to take out of here. It's been such a fun album to listen to, even just off of my re-listens, and it's going to be a mainstay for me, let's say, in this first quarter of music. So what do you want to do, man? You want to go through the entire track list? Let me know what you're keeping.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like my personal rotation, I could see myself maybe holding on to about half of the songs on here, if I'm being honest, in terms of just what I fuck with. And when I go to like, you know, Atlanta Trap, or when I go to 21 Savage's catalog, yeah, there's maybe half of the album that I maybe would include in my listening. Now, when it comes to actual skips or songs that I think are mid, maybe only 3 or 4. So the skip count is pretty healthy for me.
That's it. Yeah, and I think you only find that really at the latter half of the album, to be honest with you. That was like one complaint that I did have with the album, was that once you get past the Travis Scott feature, it kind of gets a bit sleepier, but thankfully there are songs like Red Sky and Dark Days that kind of like ended off on a good note. Like that run from, let's say, See the Real all the way to Just Like Me, that's not my favorite run of the album. That's a good 4 songs.
And I also don't like it as a curation choice. The fact that he clustered all the R&B songs together, it felt forced. It felt like he was sort of trying to follow a formula. So that was an issue for me. Speaking about the overall thoughts on the album, how did you feel about that?
It's like, how could I say? We were speaking about it yesterday. It's like the recipe to trap albums, you know? Yeah. Put all the bangers for like 60 to 70% of the album at the beginning, and then just shove all the R&B cuts at the end, like hoping no one's going to listen to them. And maybe they'll catch up for the ladies, you know?
He can't sing or express romance in like the most interesting ways, so those songs are almost setups for like...
Exactly.
You know,
and it does bring down like the replay value of the album, because... Am I going to go back and listen to this album from start to finish again? Yeah, I'll give it a chance, but it's not a start to finish album. You know, it's not maybe like a Savage Mode 2 where you could go all the way throughout it, then it's banger after banger after banger after banger without like Mr. Right Now, for example. But regardless, though, I do feel like that was a problem with it. But as you said, I am keeping songs out of this. So
replay value good.
Replay value good.
You agree?
Me. Yeah, replay value.
Yeah, so I kind of gave some overall thoughts. I'll just expand upon that. I think that 21 Savage did curate a good album for the most part in terms of getting the message he wanted to get across, in terms of getting the right artists and producers to work with. The number of tracks as well. It was a healthy 15, not too much, not too little. I was really happy
49 minutes as well. Good
the
runtime.
Sequencing as well. There's a lot of cool transitions from song to song. Not consistently throughout, but there's a couple of cool transitions. Apart from that, 21 Savage gave you a nice variety of tracks on here. You get your high voltage trap bangers, you get your more vulnerable deep cuts that are really enjoyable. Do I think that he showed the most artistic growth on this album? Not necessarily, but he did remind us of his really good skill set and his good judgment when it comes to picking beats, when it comes to working with the right people. So again, does it put 21 Savage on a whole other stratosphere for me? Not exactly. It didn't blow me out of my seat, but he maintained what he's been maintaining, and I think it's a cool step for him.
It is a cool step
to have the movie attached.
I was
as well.
Happy with it.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's good to see him winning. It's good to see him in a good place in his life, and I like the fact that there was sort of like a cohesive message throughout the album, and that's living out the American dream, striving for the best, going through adversity, following a straight arrow path and really making it in life. And I feel like that was a prominent sentiment throughout the album as well. I like that we got different producers off of this album. If it was going to be full of Metro beats, don't get me wrong, I'm down for that. But I'd rather that be a 21 Savage and Metro Boomin collaboration album, like maybe a third installment of Savage Mode or whatever else they call it. So it was nice to see that he went with a different cast of producers for this. I really like the intro and outro to the album. That's a big part for me because whenever you go through an album experience, whenever you could end it, whenever you could start it and end it on a good note, that always makes sense for me, and I really like that about it as well. Once you start getting into like tracks 1 to 9, high voltage all the way throughout, there's going to be a lot of songs that I keep off of here. And like you said, I don't think it's like revolutionary for 21 Savage, but he delivered and he did
Yeah,
what he
he
had to do on this. So overall, I think the album is great. It's going to get a great
It
rating
is a
from
great
née-nah.
rating. I agree.
Absolutely. It's such a cool way to start off 2024. The live album reaction was such an awesome time with us yesterday, guys. So if you want to watch the live album reaction and access our entire live album reaction catalog on Patreon, check the link in the pinned comment and check the link in the description because we're going to be doing these every single Thursday, and 21 Savage is just the start. We have Playboi Carti's music coming up. We maybe have J. Cole dropping this year. So let's see what ends up happening. But thank you so much for watching this review, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.